Hello everyone, it's Dr. Paul Rose here with a short presentation all about social behaviour. In this presentation, I'd like to talk about the different types of social behaviour that we can identify, so that if you're interested in using social networks analysis to gain a better understanding of the relationships, the social structure and the social organisation of the animals that you are investigating, you are able to do valid and clear analysis of your observations. When we look at social behaviour, we need to consider associations and interactions. And that's especially important if you're doing social network analysis, because social network analysis considers associations and interactions very, very differently when it comes to running the analyses themselves. Interactions and associations depend very much on the context that the animals are within. Key features of the environment that might be influencing the type of social behaviour that you see. So this presentation provides you with examples of these two different types of social behaviour, as well as some considerations of other impacts that might be influencing the reason why that social behaviour is being performed. Perhaps the animal that I am most associated with when it comes to investigating sociality is the flamingo. The flamingos in this flock are all wearing leg rings. Therefore, the birds are individually identifiable. So even in large, busy groups where we have a mixture of associations and interactions going on, if we understand what these behaviours look like, we can still collect valid and repeatable data that we can use in social networks analysis to gain a better understanding of the social lives of the animal. What you will now see are some examples of animals performing social behaviour, and I have attempted to identify whether or not the social behaviour could be classed as an association or an interaction. And I have also provided information on why context around the performance of the association or interaction is so important. Remember, this is my interpretation of the behaviour, but there could be many factors at play that help us understand why that type of social behaviour is being performed. Let's start off with a relatively easy one. This is an example of a directed interaction from one animal to another. One tiger is performing a social behaviour to another tiger. We would class that as an interaction. And now for an example of associations using these Mandarin ducks. These mandarins have spaced themselves out along this perching, and the different degree of space between individuals is how we denote our association. Stronger bonds would be found between birds that are closer together. So associations are generally based on a proximity, a biologically relevant measure between individuals. Neck length, arm length, wing length, beak length, anything that would determine a degree of distance that is repeatable when looking at that social group. Because an association does not involve direct interaction between individuals, we must measure this proximity over and over again so it's repeatable between the individuals that we are studying. If you're interested in animal welfare and you're interested in how animals interact with each other in captivity, the classification of social behaviour is really important. The interactions or associations that we see in mixed species holdings, like between this capybara and this whistling duck, can tell us a lot about how individuals get on in a shared space. Avian duets are complex behaviours, but they are interactions because the two birds are interacting with each other, as well as other individuals around them that they're trying to shout out or drown out to enforce their own pair bond and territory. So this is an example of where this vocalisation would be measured as a directed interaction. The number of times that individuals lead and follow, as well as the order of individuals when they are leading and following, gives you an idea of the strength of association between those in the social group. Again, a proximity measure that can be used repeatedly to see what types of social bonds are occurring between individuals. So the consistency of this order when leading and following tells us a lot about what individuals get from this social organisation. Who are they influenced by and who do they influence? But again, remember, as an association, this proximity must be measured repeatedly. Many individuals in many species will play, and play is one of the most obvious of directed interactions to observe and measure. Who plays with whom and when, and who avoids playing with whom, all relates to the specific network structure within a group. This type of association is more challenging to measure and requires repeated observation of individual animal proximity. Sitting down and resting, how far are you away from somebody else, and who are you more likely to do that with, can be a real firm indicator of a social bond. Make sure that the proximity measure is biologically relevant for your species, that you can identify individuals, and that you consistently measure who is next to whom at the same time of day. The performance of some behaviours in some species has real fitness benefits. For example, rumination in ruminant herbivores. Who do you ruminate with again can be measured as an association based on nearest neighbour. In the case of giraffe, a good proximity measure would be neck length. Who stands within one neck length of each other when they're ruminating? And because giraffe are individually identifiable from their coat pattern, we can easily build up a pattern of associations which tells us about social bonds. This is really helpful if we want to compare across populations. Looking for this group level rumination, for example, and who is doing it together, gives us an indication of the strength of social relationship within giraffes' herd across different facilities or different animal collections, because the same behaviour will be performed in the same way by all individuals regardless of where you find them. These measures of association are not just for mammals and birds, but we can use this for a whole range of different taxonomic groups. This middle fish has backed away from the fish that has swum behind it, and the two fish on the left have swum together as a pair. Therefore, we have different social bonds within this fish school. The more you observe the social relationships between individuals in a group, the more you will see about why they matter to the individuals that perform them. A bonded pair of Caribbean flamingos at the back can be determined by an association. The birds are within a neck length of each other. The male at the back follows the female. The directed interaction, the squabbling, of the closer birds can be measured to explain why there is a dynamic difference in sociality across the flock. Associations can also be based on who performs the same behaviour together. In many species of bird, if you bathe together, you've got social ties. These associating ostriches are all doing the same thing. Sometimes you might have to know your individuals really well if you have species that perform associations and interactions together. This huddle of ring-tailed lemurs are associating, but they're also conducting directed interactions too. It's really important to have a well-defined ethogram that explains the different categories of social behaviour, so you can record those that are important to you correctly. The white faces of white-faced whistling ducks direct the allopreening that occurs between bonded pairs. This is a really easy directed interaction to measure. How much interaction occurs between different individuals in the flock tells you about the strength of social bonds. This is very important when you want to measure sociality and you want to create a network. What is bringing the animals together in the same place? Is it because they like the others around them and they're choosing to hang around together? Bad pun with the bat. Or is it because there's a really valuable or limited resource that everybody wants to access at the same time? Bat roosts are excellent ways of social communication where individuals share information on the best feeding and foraging sites. So yes, everybody does gather at the same bat roost for protection, but where you hang and who you hang next to can still be a measure of social bonds within that one area that's bringing everybody in the same place. Likewise, if you're feeding together, you might not like the individuals that you're foraging with. You're simply accessing a limited, valued resource that's been provided in one area. But again, if this was measured consistently over time, who forages next to whom, who is aggressive or subordinate to whom, layers the extra social information on the gregarious behaviour. Gregarious simply being the animals were found in a group. And if the individuals were brought together for reproductive purposes, for example, the courtship display in these Caribbean flamingos, you might have to think differently about the reason why the birds are all together in one place. Is this true social choice? Are they really choosing their associates? Or are they simply gathering together because the behaviour's potential is maximised when everybody displays together? So know your species biology and know the reason why that type of behaviour is performed in a social setting. If the animal is provided with enrichment, if the animal is provided with something highly valued that will bring members of the group together, such as the case of browse for these two lechwe, is that indicative of a friendliness, of an association between these two animals? Or is it forcing them to share the same space because they both want access to the browse? Again, consider the context and consider the environment and how that's impacting on the animal's social choice. Measurement of association away from times when enrichment is provided, when the animals can choose different social partners, when there is free choice of movement around the enclosure, and when there is no extra influence of nice tasty browse to eat, will tell you a more accurate picture of preferential, non-random social bonds based on how they invest their time away from that tasty treat. These animals here might really love each other because they're choosing to sit and chew the cud next to each other rather than eat the browse. And in the cases of where animals breed in groups, like this colony of Andean flamingos, all of the animals are forced together to breed in the same place because their evolutionary strategy is to all breed in one area as one group. So we probably can't measure social bonds by proximity in this case, but we can look at directed interactions, the aggressive behaviour you can see, the jousting, the biting and the head swaying, the intense vocalisation, that is caused by the clumping of flamingos together in this nesting colony. So again, the measurement of interactions, who performs the interaction and to whom, what is the outcome of the interaction, winners or losers of that particular aggressive behaviour, again can be turned into a social network which explains the position of the nests in the colony, potentially the choice of breeding partner, and ultimately gives us more of an insight into the social environment of the breeding area of these animals. I hope these examples have been useful for you. They can show you why we must consider the natural behaviour of the species, how it organises itself when in a social group, and what other influences on sociality are around before we start to observe and define associations or interactions. Always keep to a specific method that is repeatable across populations of the animal, because ultimately that will ensure that your method is valid and what you actually see is indicative of the true social choices being made by the individuals within the group that you are researching.